considering how many things have been stopping us and programs being cut and everything going on. We wanted to make sure that was recognized, that this momentum was not built for nothing.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm really excited to have Ilka Cassidy with us today for this interview or series of interviews that Ilka conducted at the BuildingEnergy Boston conference, this excellent conference that is put on by NESI. And there's so much great material that Ilka was able to capture during her experience at NESI that we're going to do this in two parts. So this is part one of two. Ilka, great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad that I can share a little bit of my perspective of the conference, because as usual, it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I should say I'm Zach Semke. I'm director of Passive House Accelerator and one of the co-hosts along with Ilka and many others, including Matthew Cutler-Welsh. And Matthew is traveling today, so he's not able to join us. He sends his regards. But let's dive into it. But before we do, we have a few people to thank. I want to start by thanking New Energy Works for being the sponsor of this special episode, these two special episodes of the Passive House podcast and making them possible. A big thank you also to Zender for being our sponsor of the week and making everything possible here at the Passive House Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast. Thank you too to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And thanks to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. And thanks to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, Icon Windows and Doors, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, Proseco, Source 2050, and Zender. So with that, Ilka, tell us a little bit about this interview we're about to hear, or these interviews we're about to hear.
Well, I actually want to thank Jacob Rakusin for doing this with me this year. So that was really exciting. He's the co-founder of New Frameworks Natural Design Built, and he is just a wealth of knowledge on every level. And yeah, it was great that he put some time aside to hang out with me and really just talk about all these different presentations and what was going on at the conference, which was great.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in.
Jacob, hi.
Okay. Hello. Good to be with you.
Yeah, how are you?
Terrific.
Awesome.
Yep, feeling all the NESI love.
Awesome. Yeah, we're here at BuildingEnergy Boston
Woo-hoo.
2026,
Mm-hmm.
and I am super excited that you're going to join the podcast this year.
It's an honor. Yes, home team representation. Glad to be with you.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I know you're very, very busy these days. You came in from a different conference.
Yes, I was at ResNet conference in Texas last week, so really exciting to kind of carry that energy. Different part of the country, slightly different community, but some really strong overlap and focus of how we just improve the way we're building buildings. So nice through line here.
Awesome. So you came in last night. Now we're on the first day.
Yes.
Pretty much half day through the first day of the, we always say NESI conference, but in fact it's the BuildingEnergy Boston conference.
Good to be formal there, yes.
Yeah. You are presenting a few times.
Yes,
and then you're also playing the saxophone.
We'll be playing some musical accompaniment around as well. Yep, helping keep some of the humanity and joy in the conference as well. Yep.
Yeah, and you are actually the the conference chair last year,
Yes.
right? So that's another reason why I'm so excited that you agreed to do this with me this year, because you have all the background knowledge.
Yes, I know how the sausage gets made, and I will say that it is a really gratifying experience to come to the conference the year after having chaired it. One, to not have all of the responsibility, but two, to really understand what it takes to make a conference like this work, and to just to experience it. It's really amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're actually going to talk to this year's conference chairs
Yes.
just in a little bit.
Looking forward to this.
Yeah. So, what are your expectations this year? What are your feelings? You know, what's the mood? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mixed emotions in our community right now. It has been a really hard year for a lot of folks for a number of different reasons. The headwinds are non-trivial and are showing up economically and politically and socially. And at the same time, there's so much incredible work that is happening. There's so much amazing developments from the technical sides to just the fact that many of us are still moving forward really strongly with all of our goals and objectives of improving the built environment, not only in spite of, but because of some of the headwinds we're facing. So I'm really kind of keeping my ear out for, how are people showing up at this point? How comfortable are folks talking about their challenges, including the emotional challenges, which are like really big things to address when we're like facing this work day after day after day to avoid burning out. But also, like, what are the things that folks have been doing that are working, and like where are the places we're still getting traction and still the movement is still moving forward strongly, and trying to really identify those and kind of lean into those. So looking forward to seeing the spread of all the feels.
And last year's theme was actually building the movement, right? And this year's conference theme is "Don't Stop Us Now."
Yes.
Right. So it's very appropriate.
I love the continuity of that. It makes me so happy.
Yeah. And there's some other continuities that are happening as well, which I guess we can talk about in a little bit when we talk to the official conference chairs of this year.
Get their word on that.
Yeah. So, but I think it's just hearing what other people are still doing is just so important, and that's why we're here, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's important on the personal level. It's really easy to just be locked in our little bubbles and not feel like we're part of a larger community. And it's easier to burn out. It's easier to just feel like the work we're doing isn't meaningful or isn't impactful. It's also really important, like strategically, to figure out who else is doing work in our space and who are the other people kind of doing this good work, and how can we make sure we stay aligned with them.
Yeah. Great. We also. So what was very, I guess, appropriate for this year's theme and the bigger picture of what is going on is the keynote this morning. And the title was "In for the Long Run, the Cost of Pausing." So that was a great keynote, and I will actually be able to talk to the presenters in a little bit as well.
That's great.
But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was really interesting. The keynote was a consultant that does a lot of work on helping larger projects and organizations realize their climate impact reduction goals within their projects. And then two different organizations, MIT and then Cell Technologies, I am forgetting their exact name, CTI, I believe are the initials. They're in the life sciences space and developing a really large laboratory. And it was really encouraging to hear the sort of consistency of the vision around how they're sort of maintaining their climate goals, as well as identifying that they need not be cost burdens, but rather like organized as good business plans, and that there's like a really strong business case that they can make around maintaining their climate goals, either in that the to mitigate cost impacts or other sort of challenges associated with those reductions, but also that there's real value to the market, and that there's co-benefits that are strong business imperatives that show up in the reduction of their climate emissions. So to be able to have larger organizations doing like real work at scale, MIT on the campus level, CTI doing this like really large life sciences build out, which is incredibly big and complicated building, that they're like, nope, this still makes sense, and there's real value here, and the value extends beyond just carbon metrics. I think that's the story that needs to be told more and more and more. I hear a really large perception bias out there that, oh, well, if it's better for the climate, it's going to cost more, or there's going to be more friction, or it's like harder, or there's some other like penalty associated with that. And it was just great to clearly identify that not only is that not always the case, that's like there are actually really strong positive business decisions to be made around that same value of climate, addressing the climate crisis. So I think that story needs to be told a lot more, and to have folks of that standing and building out at that scale to be telling that story is really important for the entire industry, to show that this is still possible despite all of, or even because of the headwinds we're all facing.
Yeah. And just taking a positive look at what's going on right now, I thought that was really helpful. That was a good start to the conference this morning, that while being honest about what is going on and the challenges that we are facing right now, and of course them as companies, as consultants that are relying on that business, right? But that there is still some things that, that you can get from it, right?
Yes.
That you can look at it in a different way too.
Yeah.
It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom.
Yes.
So I thought that was just a really nice start of this year's conference.
I agree.
And,
it was a great framing.
Yeah. I'm excited to see all the sessions for the rest of the day.
A lot of learning to come still. Yeah, we're just getting into it here.
Yeah, and maybe while I have you here, what's your session, or what are your sessions about?
So presenting at 2 sessions. First is looking at a 100 home benchmarking study that we conducted in Massachusetts, of looking at how the HERS rating industry, energy rating industry, is able to now start assessing embodied carbon on homes. And we did a benchmarking study of looking at 100 homes, both from the operational energy through the HERS rating, HERS index, the carbon that comes from that energy through the HERS carbon index, the resonant carbon index, and now looking at the embodied carbon of those buildings and being able to look at that total carbon picture. Really exciting. Some like really novel research, novel technology. It's really helpful to really dive into the residential space and figure out at scale how we can manage the total carbon picture of our buildings. So that's one. And then the other one, I'm co-presenting with a fellow, Ben Bogie, who is one of the leading building science practitioners in the custom home building space, and we're looking at how do we take all this, material carbon and material health information and bring that to the building community and help the design and build communities make really good decisions. Really, how do we put this into practice? How do we operationalize that? And how do we take, or sometimes like some pretty like heady and complex conversations or more technical analysis, and really help translate that in ways that the building community can make really good, confident, actionable decisions. So we'll be focusing on that for the second presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, I also think that's really important to have people walk away with some takeaways that they can actually do themselves.
Absolutely.
And I do think the idea of aligning or just kind of incorporating the HERS raters into this whole movement is a really good idea, without trying to add too many things to what they're already doing, right? Or what everyone is already doing, because the HERS rating is something that's broadly, either required or accepted. And to just kind of use that and incorporate the embodied carbon in a way that it's not seen as an additional cost and additional work. So yeah, great. I'm excited to see both of them.
Yes, I'm excited to be part of the mix this year. It's a real honor to be able to help contribute to this shared body of knowledge that this community is invested in.
Awesome.
We're here halfway through the first day of BuildingEnergy Boston, and we are actually here with the conference chair and co-chair.
Both of us are co-chairs.
Oh, okay.
Shared responsibilities.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. Yeah, maybe just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about NASI and the conference. That'd be awesome.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm Clay Tilton. I am one of the co-chairs alongside Greg for this year's 2026 conference, and I work for Built Environment Plus, which is a nonprofit that is trying to accelerate change in the built environment. My focus is around existing buildings, since some of my background is in auditing existing buildings, doing energy models, and trying to recommend better practices. And now I'm just doing that at kind of a different scale. Instead of for projects and clients, it's trying to make a centralized resource that just a website that I wish I had 5 years ago to help answer all the questions that I had then. So that's kind of my deal. How about you, Greg?
So yes, Greg Smith, and I'm an architect, and I work at Moody Nolan. My path with sustainability has been since I visited Switzerland in like 1990 and saw that there was a better way to do things architecturally, in terms of design, in terms of people, bringing people together, and just in terms of energy performance. So I brought that back with me, and I've been pushing it ever since. And it's exciting to be a conference chair and see the progress that has been made since then. And we are not stopping, obviously. We're keeping going. And the energy of this conference is always what brings me back. I said earlier that these are my people, and I truly believe it. And I think that we're all here to work together and just see where we can go with it and not stop.
Great. And there are definitely, we still have Jacob with us here as well, so who is last year's conference chair. And we were just discussing earlier that there are some things that got carried over from last year's conference. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So Jacob and his co-chair Kirsten had the theme last year of building the movement. And it was all about bringing other people into the fold and pushing forward the kind of green building agenda, so to speak, but at a wider scale. And this year, considering how many things have been stopping us and programs being cut and everything going on, we wanted to make sure that was recognized, that this momentum was not built for nothing. So that's why this year's theme is Don't Stop Us Now. And it may or may not have been inspired by a certain song, but we changed one of the words, so it's totally copyright free. But it is important that it's us, because it's a whole community. Not everybody can just do the thing alone. You need to rely on other people. Projects are built up of many, many different kinds of backgrounds, so I think it's really important. And Nessie really brings that together, so I really appreciate keeping that going.
I agree with everything that Clay has said. The way that we also craft the keynote sessions is to help bring that message along on a broader scale and to balance out the different perspectives and the different things we're looking for, whether it's being inspired to reach in within yourself, to find the energy and find the abilities to push beyond the boundaries that you have, and then to hear about success stories and how long-term thinking and planning can just bring us forward and not leave anybody behind.
I gotta say, as a prior conference chair, it's very gratifying and seeing how the sausage gets made to then come to the conference and just see what a masterful piece you all have pulled off in the last year. It's really impressive. And I know it's very subtle and small, but just to your point, Greg, to see some of the spontaneous moments of joy and play that you've not only carried through the giant Jenga, but then expanded upon with arts and crafts and just the human care and the personal care and the sort of fun and play and joy and celebration part of that. We need that as part of this work. It can't all just be technocratic. And if part of what we're doing is to connect together and continue to motivate and support each other moving forward with the work, I just really appreciate how you all sort of really leaned into that part of it. Last year we were really thinking of that as part of the Nessie birthday and the sort of birthday celebration and building a movement and let's try to focus on the humanity. And so yeah, it was really wonderful to see how you've taken that small but I consider really important part of the conference culture and experience and move that forward. So yeah, thank you. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say too, because I was very happy when I saw that on the program that there is still game night and that there is poetry, because I think we go to these conferences, there's obviously because we want to, learn from everyone's knowledge, but there's just so much about community building and being in a safe spot here right now. And this, playfulness is always very, very appreciated. And I think it's very unique to Nessie. So I'm always happy to come here, and I'm glad that you carried that over from last year as well.
I will say, as someone that goes to a lot of conferences, I have not yet found a conference that brings that much fun and play into such a seriously top shelf, super high caliber content, session environment. So boy, is it fun to see building science nerds getting silly. It's good for all of us.
And Jacob's underplaying himself. Well, he will be playing himself. There's going to be some surprise saxophone, which is going to be a nice recurring thing. And I wonder how many years we can squeeze out of you for that.
As long as I keep coming, I'll keep playing.
So that's always exciting. And I'm glad you opened the door for fun stuff, because it just makes it better.
Great. So any other hopes and expectations for the rest of the day and for tomorrow?
Well, I've enjoyed hearing people say, I cannot decide which session to go to. They're all so good. And I think that shows that the curation process that this conference does, which is unique from my understanding, is the reason why. And we do want to bring diverse viewpoints and the content of thinking about different points of view, different scales, and also to help people. Our curation process is unique as well. And I'm excited to be a part of that and to watch it grow.
Yes, I'm really excited to see so many more new faces. There's so many students, there's so many emerging professionals, and I mean, I've really only been a part of NESI for 6 years, so I've had a rather short tenure, and here I am, chairing a conference, which is fun, but it's really refreshing to see so many new people invested in the field, because that's the only way this field's going to grow, and I think sustainability is hip enough with the new generation, I say, and I think it's going to keep going, and they're not going to stop us, hopefully. They're going to keep it going.
Well, NESI really supports the students coming here, right? What did we hear? How many scholarships were given out?
Yeah, almost 50.
Yeah, a good amount. So it's great. And going back to the sessions, I mean, there was only, I think, a 30% acceptance of the sessions this year. And I've actually been on the committee the second year now, and it's just amazing how much effort everyone puts into really picking very well thought through sessions so that everyone can get the most out of it.
I'm Julie Newman. I'm the Director of Sustainability at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I've been there for about 12 years.
I'm Arlen Lee, Planning Principal at the architectural and engineering firm HGA, and I've been with them for about 7.5 years.
Anthony Michetti. I'm Director of Sustainability at Cell Signaling Technology, and I have been with them almost 5 years now.
Awesome. So the keynote was in for the long run, the cost of pausing, which is very much in line with the conference theme, right? Of don't stop us now. So I thought that was a great choice for the keynote. So what was the idea? What was how did the three of you get together? Because that's
I'll start it off.
Unlikely combination, right? With all your backgrounds.
I'll start it off. So we actually have had the good fortune to work with both MIT and Cell Signaling Technology on building projects. And when we saw this theme, Don't Stop Us Now, kind of raised an internal question with us that, these are buildings that we had done for these two organizations that really embodied a very high level of sustainable statement, I'll call it. In the case of the MIT building, it was a clean room, which is a very energy intensive building type. But we were given a real directive from the client to design the most energy efficient clean room, period, anywhere. And then from CST, they have plans for a new laboratory facility that they want to embody very strong cultural sustainability that they have in their company. They want to embed it into their facility. So the question was, okay, this was, going back maybe 2 to 5 years. Now with all the things that are happening today, does that have an effect on their priorities for what they're doing now and for their future buildings? And so that's kind of how this whole thing started. We thought, well, let's just invite them to talk about it.
Well, and that's what you did, right? Which was great. I thought the keynote was great, the way you had it set up, explaining what you're each doing, all of you are doing, and then basically just having a conversation and asking each other questions. So what I was thinking is, instead of me asking you questions, maybe we'll do a tiny little recap of what you did this morning, and you can ask the questions that were most important for you. Mm-hmm. How about that?
That's a good idea. we organized our discussion around the cost of pausing and the argument for not pausing. So I'll share some of the questions we asked. But then we moved on to maintaining momentum, so the adaptive strategies. And then we moved on to the final one of thinking about the long-term view for the future. So we were really trying to set up the audience from, a little maybe shrugged at first of like, oh, what is the cost of pausing? But I think from the conversations I'm having, we left people very hopeful and curious, and I think seems to be motivated to find new ways of communicating. So maybe one of the questions is maybe insight from maybe both of you around some of the current challenges that you're facing. I think that would be something the audience would be of interest.
Yeah, and I'm happy to start through a cell signaling technology lens. We are somewhat unique in that we're private and family-owned and a biotech company. There's really been an attack on science. So for us, it has a big effect on our customers, which then in turn, we're selling them research products. That is our business. So we've been largely affected by the lack of funding going to research and scientists trying to understand how they're going to move forward. So as a result of that, not just sustainability-related budget, but across departments, and obviously tied directly to our revenue and our business, understanding how maybe some cutbacks or some uncertainty that's carrying through this year may affect projects moving forward. So I've really had to reprioritize and reassess and think again about some strategic planning that we had in place and see where maybe there's opportunities to have some conversations about other projects that had either stalled or were not prioritized, and maybe unfortunately deprioritizing some projects that were more costly or going to involve more resources. So trying to continue to work cross-functionally internally, but then also understand opportunities for external partnerships to keep our projects moving forward, maybe with some rethinking of which ones are moving forward.
And as consultants, we, in a sense, go as our clients go. So if they have a building project and it goes on hold, obviously we go on hold. It impacts our staffing, impacts workload, etc. But my takeaway from this morning's discussion was a very positive one, in that I'm really encouraged to hear that there is a lot of what we call, whether you call it recalibration or whether you call it ability to kind of rethink and adapt, but there's no talk about going back. I didn't hear a single word that really implied that it's still all moving forward. Maybe you're not moving forward quite in the same direction where you started, but you ultimately are still aiming for that same target. So that was very encouraging to me.
Yeah, no, I thought that was even, walking out of your session, it was definitely, you were pretty honest about this is the situation, right? We can't deny that. There's funding that's being cut. We are all affected. But somehow, maybe that pause gives us a little bit more time to think about things. And maybe, we think about it as just very temporary and not in the long run. So how do we strategically kind of still follow our initial plan? And I thought that was very positive overall.
The only thing I'll add, and then we can move on to some other questions, is I think I really appreciated how our dialogue re-emphasized the unique role of science, so that we're coming, we're going to have the political waves and we're going to have the financial challenges, but science will continue to come back and be a common ground for all of us here today in terms of providing direction around mitigation, resiliency, and adaptation. And I think we also found common purpose in the unique role of data. And even with, I think, a multi-generational audience, just setting the tone of being able to look backwards to go forwards. And some people aren't looking quite as far back as some of us, but that's okay. It's still the notion of kind of looking behind. What did we learn? What were some of the challenges at that time? And then the last thing I'll add is, I feel you guys helped me with this as well, but I think we all leaned into the framework of resiliency, not just climate resiliency, but personal resiliency at this time. And I think that's very helpful to walk away with, I know, for myself today as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was also helpful to hear that if you talk to people maybe beyond your circle, that you actually can find a lot of meaningful support that way. And if nothing else, just be able to relate things that are happening with your own organization to what's happening elsewhere. And a lot of times that will lead to thoughts that you really didn't have about how you can deal with the situation.
Yeah, like how you talked about finding the common ground, and it's really about communication again, right? Because we kind of follow very similar goals from different directions, but how do you bridge that communication gap and really talk about it? So this is just really important to actually get together and talk about it.
I mean, one of the other questions during our session that I had both for Julie and Arlen was kind of what are those internal and external influencers, both at like a state and local level for you, Julie, and then I think more so, Arlen, from your perspective of what are you hearing from clients, how are you keeping clients on task, and making climate conversations non-negotiable in your conversations.
Yeah, I can start on the state and city and state level. That's really baked into the way that we do our work at MIT. And so one of the pieces I was able to share when we jumped into the dialogue together is that MIT's whole commitment at the campus level to climate and sustainability action, if you will, is grounded in this scales of impact framework of looking at the role of the individual, the campus, for us, campus, for some of you listening, maybe organization, the city in which we're based, the state, the region, the nation, and the globe, and working across those scales as we think about what our sustainability and climate challenges are, what our impacts are, how we should solve across those scales. Because we never look at decarbonization as an island. We never think of, we are not an island as an organization. We rely on global supply chains. We rely on, we're impacted by a global changing climate. And when we think about the evolution to a zero carbon campus, we have to think about what can we do on our own campus. We're transforming, 100-year-old infrastructure. As I was saying on the panel as well, we started on coal, and now we're trying to get to zero carbon in 25 years. I mean, that's when you think about that historical trend, it's remarkable, but we have the technology. We just have to, maybe slow down a little bit from a budget perspective, but then bring all the best minds around thinking about what do we do first, and then what happens on campus at the site level, what happens at the utility scale level, where do we interact with the greater Boston area, and then what's going to happen on the grid. And we do all of those concurrently, and how important that is. And the last two pieces I'll say, like, we're baked into a city that's putting a cost to carbon of $234 a metric ton if we're emitting beyond their requirements. So we're paying close attention to that, because otherwise that's going to cost all of the organizations impacted quite a bit of money, both in Cambridge and Boston. But that's a potential direction, and I think solutions will emerge from that hopefully become transferable and scalable. And lastly, we're also baked into a state that is completely committed to mitigating climate through various codes and regulatory environment and deep investments and incentives. So it's unique times, and obviously that's not going to be the same across all states, but I think it will provide a model for the future, as different things open up at different times across the country.
Regarding how we make strategies non-negotiable, as Anthony mentioned, I use the term corollary benefit, which to me means that you do something that is meaningful not just in one vein, but it really has many benefits attached to it, so that it becomes really part of the fundamental design of the building. It's not something you can pull back. And I use green roof as an idea, as an example of something that you can either pose it as here's a highly sustainable feature that will add to your whatever visibility or whatever, but if it doesn't go beyond that, it's not going to get much backing. If you can say, no, it actually ties into your stormwater management, it actually is part of the way your building performance is actually working, it's reducing heat island effect, it's got all kinds of positive influences that are just beyond the initial look of it, then it actually has a value that goes beyond just something that is an add-on to the building. It becomes integral to whatever you're doing. I think just my takeaway at the end, we asked about long-term, looking to the long term, and I had asked a question to both Julie and Anthony about what are the long-term goals of MIT and CST, and what are the drivers and policies in place that might continue to prioritize those in the long term.
Yeah, we have a climate goal to achieve net zero emissions by our 30th anniversary in 2029, so that's not going away, and it's coming up very quickly, so we need to figure that out. Leadership understands that, and I always try to reframe it or frame it in conversations, whether they're about our new campus that Arlen and HGA is working on us with, or if it's discussing our supply chain or looking across our value chain. I do also think we each brought our unique perspectives today and have different stakeholders or customers that we engage with. So understanding their expectations in the life science industry, we're seeing much more third-party disclosures and certifications being required across supply chains coming from some of the big pharma players. So that's encouraging. It's real and it's happening and it seems to be aligning. So that is encouraging to me as well, but it's new for us in addition to everything else that I was working on or that we were planning and that we were working on. We need to now figure out what that means on top of everything else. So it's exciting and it's a lot to think about, and it will definitely take some time as well.
I mean, on our end, I was saying that MIT is not going anywhere. We're very much in it for the long term, but that's a privilege we get to work within. So while it is challenging at the moment, I would say we actually have. I didn't have a chance to get. We actually have 18 different commitments that I'm helping push along at the moment that range from timelines of 2026 all the way out to 2050 being decarbonization. I'd say for the relevancy of today, we were focused on mitigation, resiliency, and adaptation. And on the mitigation front, we're committed to being a net zero campus this year in 2026, and we're on track for that with our large-scale power purchase agreements that are up and running. We're absolutely committed to zero emissions by 2050, and those plans we've been building for the past 2 years, and so we're just getting started at the moment in kind of a design phase. We're also committed to, that's for scope 1 and 2. We do have a scope 3 portfolio, which I'm sure some listeners are interested in. That's a more difficult thing to set a goal for because those are individual choices people are making, but we've accounted for all of those emissions, which is pretty remarkable. And then, of course, from a resiliency perspective, that's less about setting a goal as much as it is just a commitment to intervening and designing for a resilient campus with respect to flood and heat in particular. So, and then the adaptive piece is just, again, making sure we're using science to drive our decisions, understanding how we have to begin to adapt to a changing climate and inform future shading for increased heat days, which are projected in Boston. I believe by 2030 we're supposed to have about 30 heat days above 90 is what they're projecting. That was from the Boston Climate Action Plan. So we are going to have to pivot. We are going to have to plan. But MIT's all in for learning about how to do that in a very informed way. And I think the takeaway, though, is it's on campus, but it's also in collaboration and dialogue with our neighbors, with the city, within the city of Cambridge, and Boston as well. So lots more to say on that, but I think it's important, and we're very fortunate to be embedded in these nested scales of the city, Cambridge, Boston, and the state and the Commonwealth, in which we're all heading in the same direction.
Regarding taking the long view, we do all scales of projects, but the larger ones are a minimum 3 to 4 year time frame from start to finish. And so really today for a project that we're starting is literally 3 or 4 years from today. And so when we think about what's happening now, well, that is a disruption. And we made the point that disruption is short term, transformation is long term. So if you look at the time scales, we're really more in terms of our projects and what we're trying to implement, we're in the long range, the long scale time frame of the transformation. And so when we think about it that way, I think it really helps to put things in perspective that, yes, we've had things happen before. Most recently, 2020, we had the COVID pandemic, and that upset a lot of things and created a lot of havoc. But we also learned, and we were able to move on from that. And so in the span of 5 or 6 years, we've now come back, I think, to some things that we probably weren't seeing that we could come out of 5 years ago. So there's that perspective that I think can keep us on the long-term track.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I had written down in my notes as well, because I think, we're in this now, and it's really easy sometimes to get carried away and panic a little bit too, but it's very hopeful and very, very good to just kind of be reminded of all the long-term goals that were set up so many years ago, and that they're not just going to stop. People were convinced. I mean, there was a whole build-up to this point of, education and people really being dedicated to all this, and it's not going to just stop, right? So I think what you were talking about was what MIT is doing, what you're all doing, is very much along those lines of, well, we're still committed, we're still convinced, and in the long run, it's going to be okay. So I thought that was very encouraging, and I thought that was a really good start of the NESI conference.
Can I just add, you just made me think of one thing that we didn't have a chance to discuss up on stage, but I think in listening to all of us, it's a reminder that, that I do think this is a time of innovation and opportunity, and to, even as we're looking back, to look forward, lessons learned on communication. I don't think we've always done a great job on communicating, science and climate change. I mean, personally, I'm drawn to it, but doesn't mean that we've done it right. So I'm hoping part of what comes out of this are more dialogue like the three of us have had today, and then an opportunity with your expertise on how do we do a better job communicating around mitigation and resiliency and adaptation, because in this audience we all understand what that means, but it can also become quite jargony. So I look forward to learning more.
Yeah. Any last comments?
I just think the mindset is the thing that's important to me. Keep the mindset, even though you have bumps and you may not get the implementation on a schedule that you originally set. If you keep the mindset, the results will come.
We're here, end of day one, and it has been quite a day. Very busy.
Yes.
But great.
Nessie is pretty good at packing in a whole lot into each day.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you do today? I saw you this morning,
yes,
right? And we had some really good interviews, which I enjoyed.
Yes, indeed. I actually was not able to make it into any sessions today. It was exciting to be able to present this morning. That was fun, but I did get some time on the trade floor, so that was great. The Nessie trade floor was buzzing. It seems to have grown. It's definitely exciting to see the both the maturity of the size of the floor and who's showing up now, and so the diversity and changes of some of the different vendors and folks that are in the trade room. And it's just becoming more vibrant and more interesting and more relevant. I talked to a number of folks that are like, oh yeah, this is where I come to figure out kind of what's happening in the market right now. And it really had that feel to it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got to walk around a little bit too and connect with some vendors. I actually recorded a couple of interviews, one with New Energy Works, which we're going to listen to very soon.
Wonderful.
And then I also talked to Luke Winston-Almanzar, and he is with Reservoir, which is a pretty cool hot water system. So yeah, let's listen to this interview.
Great.
We just had a great conversation on the trade floor.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to meet you, Ilka.
Yeah, thanks for joining for this little conversation here, because I would like to share a little bit more about what you do and your company does.
Yeah, my name is Luke Winston-Almanzar. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of a company called Reservoir. And so we have the world's smartest electric water heater. We think that hot water is an extremely important but very, very overlooked use of energy in the home, but it's also the center of home comfort. And so like our philosophy, before I tell you like more about the product and everything, our philosophy is that we want to make sustainability awesome and like the obvious choice with better products, better performance, better experience, but also lower cost, as opposed to sustainability just being good with a lot of friction. And I think that's how we win, right? And so, you know, people got excited about electric cars because they go from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, not because they're electric, right? They might feel good that they're electric. And so in a certain sense, that's what we're trying to do with our system. And just kind of like pointing out, like continuing the electric car analogy, what most people don't realize is they use more energy to heat their water than it takes to drive an electric car. And it's this huge, huge use of energy. It's almost 20% of energy in the home. And yet most water heaters, the large majority of water heaters lack modern technology. They lack intelligence, they lack all these kinds of things. And I find that insane because I can talk to my watch. My air fryer is smarter than most water heaters, and yet they use just this tiny, tiny fraction of energy compared to a water heater, so it's about time they got a lot smarter. So what we do with Reservoir, our first product is also called Reservoir. It's the world's smartest electric water heater. It incorporates intelligence with a heat pump, with a hydronic control system that allows us to deliver just like premium features while still getting ultra high efficiency and saving money. So basically we can raise your comfort in your house while saving you a bunch of money. And so happy to tell you more.
No, I'm very curious.
Yeah. So what do I mean by premium features? So first, there's a couple features that I get personally excited about because I have a Reservoir in my own house. One is like our no-wait shower. So it's the only heat pump water heater that is actually able to integrate a recirculation pump. And so what that means is we can warm up your faucets before you even turn on the faucet. For those of you who already know about like recirculation, you might know that it tends to be like a huge energy guzzler because you're warming up your pipes all day long. What we actually have though, because we have an onboard computer, we can predict your behavior. We can predict when you need the water warm and when you don't. And so we're actually able to have instant hot water without wasting a ton of energy. The other side of things is we're able to get more hot water out of a tank of our size than basically any system on the market. Most of the time, we recommend you operate in what we call balanced mode with predictive behavior. But sometimes you have people over, whether it's family for Thanksgiving, or maybe your kids are extra dirty from playing in the mud too much or something like that, and you need a lot more hot water. We have what we call party mode. And so you can actually get 150 gallons of hot water out of the 50-gallon tank. It's not the most efficient mode, but neither is throwing a party, but it's okay to have a party sometimes. And we just realized like a lot of people were oversizing heat pump water heaters because they're worried about those few days a year where they might need that. So we gave more flex capacity. Then we have features that we call Home Protect. So we basically have 3 pillars. One is the comfort, one is home protection, and the other is savings. But under Home Protect, what we actually have is we have the ability to detect leaks in your system, so we can automatically shut off the water heater. That's nothing truly new. But what we actually can do is we can detect leaks in your hot plumbing lines. We can warn you about those. But we can also detect if your pipes might freeze. So we can sample your cold water, and then we can actually pump warm water into your pipes so they don't freeze. And this is just absolutely novel. Nobody else does this. We've realized like a lot of people are excited about efficiency and comfort, but a lot of people are very worried about water damage, and so that we're able to help prevent that. We can also help prevent and kill Legionella bacteria with automated clean cycles, and so that's Home Protect. The final piece is we're able to operate at 80% less efficiency than a gas water heater, and so what we're especially excited about is we're able to replace gas systems, we're able to get better performance, and we're able to save a bunch of money relative to even gas systems, and so that's Reservoir. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I'm actually super interested and very excited about everything you just talked about, because I actually do a lot of energy modeling.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, you're totally right that a lot of the energy goes into the hot water generation. And there is not much besides occupant behavior that you can do, really, right? You can, with the envelope of the house.
Yep.
So you really have to go into the system and pick something that is as efficient as what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And also, I've been struggling to find a good recirc system as well.
Yep.
And FIAS doesn't allow many of those systems, right? It has to be sensor controlled or something like, behavior.
Because it's a big waste of energy unless you do it intelligently. The problem is if you don't do recirculation, then you're wasting a bunch of water. I think the stat is the average family wastes 4,000 gallons of water a year just waiting for their shower to heat up, right?
Exactly. And if you go through a certification with WaterSense, there's actually a test that prevents you from wasting that water. So you have to figure out a really short line set for the hot water or a recirc.
But that's the exciting thing about technology. Like if you have technology and intelligence, you could do more with less. You don't have to give up the luxury. You don't have to give up the premium feature. You could still save. Right?
And I think what I really like is actually the analogy with the car, because that's a lot of people that you talk about or talk to don't necessarily go for the electric vehicle because of the energy efficiency. It's more that it's just nicer to drive, or that's at the end.
They're amazing cars, and then you feel good that they're electric, right?
Exactly.
And we think the same thing. Like the other side of Reservoir, I mean, I think I've talked about it like to a certain degree, is that it has an onboard computer, but it can predict your behavior. And because we can predict your behavior, we can optimize so much more. So we love heat pumps. And we think like the great thing about a heat pump is that it is very, very, very efficient. The bad thing about a heat pump, at least in an integrated heat pump water heater, is it's relatively slow. So you look at basically any heat pump water heater, it takes 5 to 6 hours for the heat pump to heat up the tank, which means if you have a reactive system, you risk either running out of hot water or going into inefficient modes of using electric resistance. But I guess one thing I like to say is you can get anywhere on time walking as long as you leave on time, right? And so if Reservoir knows that you shower regularly at 6 in the morning, it can start heating up at 1 in the morning and optimize use of that heat pump. So we actually get more efficiency. You get all the hot water you want. And
Well, that's also a lot of times the tricky thing with those hybrid water heaters, right? That you end up using a lot of the electric resistance, and then all your efficiency goes kind of out the door.
It goes down. Well, I guess it's a well-known secret that what's measured in the lab is not what you actually see in the field, and it's primarily due to that.
And I think there was a session about modeled data versus actual data. And I unfortunately didn't see the session, but I heard that at the end the overall usage it's really, really hard to predict, and I bet that comes a lot from exactly what you're talking about. This data that we're using to model is not necessarily aligned with occupants.
Or it's a plug in a spreadsheet that you get off like some website, and but pretty soon we will have more data on domestic water heating than anybody else, because our system is smart and it's connected. Every single one of the systems we've installed is still connected, and we can see, and we'll eventually be able to statistically model based on actual realized data, like what you can see in the field.
So great. I'm here with New Energy Works now. New Energy Works is actually the sponsor of this podcast today. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So Bryan, can you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about New Energy Works?
Yeah, of course. So I've been with New Energy Works it'll be 14 years this July. I started in our heavy timber post and beam construction group, which is actually where New Energy Works originally started. As a sort of an extension of that, we found ourselves looking to get into really all things wood-based construction. And I specifically spearhead the offsite construction panelization part of the business, and where we do things using all natural, sustainable materials in a high-performance manner. And over the past few years have really sort of tried to take that to the next level and include as much as we can in those panels to try to keep things as efficient as possible on site.
Awesome. And there's been a pretty long history between New Energy Works and NESI, right?
Oh yeah. So I've been coming to the NESI conferences for as long as I can remember, at least 10 years, and it's been great to sort of be part of that, and as it evolved into what it is today.
Awesome. So what's your take on this year's conference theme, and what's
I love that you can come and you can get a little bit of everything. I mean, if you're into policy, there's policy. If you're into windows or mechanicals, panelization, there's a couple different companies here for that. Materials, obviously, there's a bunch of different options there too.
Cool, awesome. So with us today is also Steve Hessler, who joined New Energy Works fairly recently. Hey, Steve.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
So what made you join New Energy Works?
Well, as you know, Holzraum System has been working with New Energy Works for many years, and we share the same kind of ethos around foam-free, low-embodied, vapor-open assemblies. New Energy Works was sort of our favorite manufacturing partner, and last year we just decided, I think I really belong in that family. And so I started in June last year. I serve as their building system specialist, and I just enjoy talking to people about what they could do with their project, how we might be able to help them, try to advise on passive house and high performance strategies. And it's been really great. It's a great fit. I feel it's an amazing team, and my kind of DFMA background fits in really nicely with our design team. So yeah, it's been good.
Very cool. First time Nessie for you.
It
right?
is first time Nessie, which is absurd. Yeah, I've been doing FIASCON since 2015, and I think you and I presented at Nessie remotely one year, but I've been meaning to get to Nessie since I actually met Eric Frazier at New Energy Works, who's now my boss, so it's kind of crazy. That was in 2017, and he's like, have you been to Nessie? And I'm like, no, I haven't yet. So it's absurd that it's taken me this long, but I'm really loving it. It's a great turnout. It's much bigger than I expected, and we've been having tremendous conversations today. A lot of students. That's been really great. There was like 3 different high schools. We had, 6, 7 kids at 3 times, really engaging and really interested in the panelization and the low-embodied carbon, all the things that we're excited about. That's the future. So I think that's been a bit of a highlight for me today.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you what your experience is so far. I mean, it's almost at the end of the first day.
Yeah.
And I mean, since you are with New Energy Works at the booth, on the trade floor, you haven't seen many of the sessions, but you have been able to take in the trade floor quite a bit. So what's your take on just talking to the people? I mean, you said you were surprised about all the students, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. Have you walked the trade floor? And
I have.
What's your impression?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's, as Bryan said, there's tremendous window. There's a lot of systems, high performance systems options. I'm always taken with some of the straw bale stuff that I saw, and there's a vertical solar panel that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, I actually have to circle back. There's so many vendors. There's a lot to take in, but every time I try to get around, I end up in another great conversation, and that's really mostly why we're here, right? Is to kind of connect and network. Fantastic networking opportunities for sure.
Yeah, I've been running into people too that I haven't seen in a while, and you kind of forget about a lot of people until you see them again, and then you talk to them, and it's like you just saw them yesterday, which is awesome.
But a lot of new people that we've been meeting, which is really exciting, and they kind of walk by our site. Sometimes they walk by and then they take a look at our nugget, our little assembly that we have out there, and it's fun to watch them. They're like, wait a minute, I got to back up and see what is this thing. So no, it's been great. It's been really good. I'm in now. I'm going to come every year.
Good. So what's coming up for New Energy Works, project-wise? What's new?
I mean, we've got a pretty busy summer ahead of us. It was, we've gotten to a point where we've got a lot of different parts of from design to fabrication to installation tuned to a point where it's just so exciting to see how fast and smoothly these projects actually go up on site. It usually blows away the people that are watching, but I've seen it enough times and it's still blown away every time.
So great interview with both of them, or with all 3 of them, with Steve, Bryan, and Luke. what did you see on the trade floor?
Yeah, brilliant folks there you got to speak with.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing that jumps out for me, because it is part of my kind of home team community, was to see the representation of the bio-based materials crew on the trade floor. DuraPanel was there. I'm super excited about their product. They are bringing compressed straw panels, almost like a drywall replacement type product from Australia that they're bringing to the US and starting US manufacturing. So that was super exciting to see some like novel bio-based material manufacturing and product representing here in the US.
Yeah.
It's great to see them there. Really happy to see the Seed Collaborative there, the straw panel, sort of network of straw panel companies. I will own some bias there, being with New Frameworks. I had nothing to do with the trade show, and just sort of seeing that representation there was exciting. And I was really excited to see, I'm going to give a big shout out to Sarah Kudra with Architecture Towards Neutral for curating the next evolution of the bio-based materials library. And so there was just this whole suite of different types of products just there for information and for inspiration around sort of new material solutions and some old ones too that were just maybe not quite as well recognized. And so it was just great to see that representation on the floor. There's been a lot of talk about that in sessions, and there's a buzz about that, but to have that actual products that you could pick up and evaluate and talk with some of the producers on the floor was really cool.
Yeah, that's very, very important to actually see the material, right?
Yes.
So do you know if those are all part of like the library of Beam, for example?
Yeah, a lot of those materials are represented in Beam, and then there's a bunch that are, I would say, even too new to show up, just because they don't have the full product documentation and the environmental product declarations that would kind of bring them into the tool.
Yeah.
But it's really exciting to see how there is an increase in the number of these types of products that are showing up, and they're getting more of that documentation in place faster than we've seen in the past, especially now that the digital production of product transparency is helping make it more accessible for smaller manufacturers and newer manufacturers. And so I'm very excited to get some of those EPDs and get that into the tool so there's more product visibility in the market there.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So one question I have for you is, there are several tools, and going through all these sessions today, different teams use Beam or Tally or other carbon counting tools. So are all the materials that are in those libraries, are they all aligned? Because I know early on that was a little bit of an issue that you couldn't even really compare all those different results from these softwares. Has that progressed?
That's a great question. I would say the work has progressed. The resolution isn't there yet. So yes, if you're trying to compare, if you're trying to do an assessment on a given building using two different types of life cycle assessment software or carbon accounting software, you're very likely to get different results. And that's not necessarily an indication that one tool is more or less accurate than the other, or that the data can't be trusted. It's more of an issue around the development of alignment and standardization of how these tools do their accounting across, more consistently across the industry. There was actually some research that was just released in Canada through the National Research Council by Anthony Pack of Priopta, where he did a very in-depth study comparing a whole series of different life cycle assessment tools and seeing where are those differences and where do we see a lot of close alignment, which we tend to see around the product phase, and then where does the alignment really start to shift, and the further into the life cycle we go, the more divergence we tend to see. And it's because the assumptions might be different, or some of the standards that different tools are following might be slightly different. So what's great is that the research is now starting to show this, and there's more work being done on the policy and standards side to make that consistency and that alignment more predictable and more consistent. That hasn't happened yet, but there's a lot of direction in the industry of how we will get to do that. So I would say if you are looking at carbon assessment and evaluating different tools, don't try to compare results from different tools too directly. Maybe a rounding to the first or second significant figure, and you'll probably get pretty close. But the work towards getting that consistent harmonization across the industry is very much in progress.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, again, we saw so many sessions, on the schedule that are focusing on carbon accounting and embodied carbon. So, and as you said in your session, the more people, the more the industry kind of pushes, there is going to be a response.
Absolutely.
To move that forward.
And now that we're seeing like the state of Massachusetts, for example, which is apropos of the NESI conference being here in Boston, that you can now get reductions in the requirements for your HERS score for the Massachusetts stretch code if you're using, say, low embodied carbon concrete or low embodied carbon insulation. Now that it's starting to show up in the regulatory space, there's all the more opportunity and all the more pressure to make sure that that kind of compliance level of consistency is there, not just as a design tool, but to really comply for certain programs. And so I think we're going to see in the years to come a dramatic improvement of the harmonization and consistency of this accounting, as there's more of the demand side interest and there's also more of the regulatory interest. So it's all going to be pushing towards better and more consistent results.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's a really good way to end day one, right?
Good end to a great day, indeed.
And I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Me too. Here's to another day tomorrow.
Awesome.
All right.
So that was part one of Ilka Cassidy's adventures at the NESI conference, the Building Energy Boston. So Ilka, it sounds like it was a really amazing conference. What were some of your highlights from what we just heard?
Well, I think for me, it's just going to the conference and doing these interviews is just highlights themselves. I like doing these conference interviews because nothing is really planned. You just kind of walk into whatever happens, and so does everyone who gets interviewed. So this is just raw footage, basically, of what is going on at the conference. And just the fact that I think at some point we'll be talking about how busy the conference was in general and how hard it was to even find a spot that was quiet enough to do these interviews. So it's just a lot of energy in general. And I think it was just very hopeful and positive as well. So just, we could hear it in the interviews that there was a lot of optimism around, and that just felt good being there.
Yeah, no, it really did come through. And I mean, you mentioned how special this conference is, and I mean, it had over 1,000 people, you said, I think we were just talking. Which is really great. And the conferences that NESI puts on both in Building Energy Boston as well as the New York conference have this reputation for a lot of rigor goes into the curation of the sessions. There's a lot of care, and it sounds like there's a lot of fun too. I found it really a breath of fresh air for my day today, listening to these interviews and the real sense of resilience and momentum that the movement has, and I think that people were kind of reinforcing with one another as they gathered. And I was really struck by that phrase that disruption is short-term and transformation is long-term, and just the sense of kind of tenacity that we're midway through transformation and we're not stopping. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, for sure. And just kind of moving everything into perspective that, I mean, especially in the building industry, everything just takes a long time, planning and designing and all of it. So, and everyone has invested so much into this movement that I didn't hear anyone who said, oh yeah, we'll just go a different route.
Right.
Everyone is definitely right on track, right on course with what they started to do.
Yeah, and that, like a building projects often take 3 to 4 years from start to completion. And, I think we all have in mind the massive disruptions that are happening right now politically, but 3 or 4 years is an eternity in politics. And one way or another, things are going to be a lot different than they are now. And also, I think that you also have institutions like MIT with an even longer sense of kind of the timelines. I really appreciated the scale from the individual scale the leader from MIT was expressing, the connection to the individual all the way up to the globe, the connection to understanding the relationship between everything they're doing on campus and the grid, and the idea that, there's no such thing as an island in this work.
Yeah, and I think what also came out was that you might talk about things a little bit differently now, but it doesn't mean that you're not doing them.
Yeah.
And just talking across professions too. I mean, the three of them doing the keynote together, I mean, that was great because they just showed so many different perspectives and how important it is to, especially at a time like this, to get together and speak the same language in some form.
Yeah, absolutely. It was also great to get some glimpses of the trade show floor and to hear from both New Energy Works, who is the sponsor of and made your coverage of the conference possible. So big thank you to New Energy Works, as well as Reservoir, who is a sponsor of Passive House Accelerator. And I really enjoyed the analogy or the observation that we use more energy to heat our water in our homes than it takes to drive an EV. And, that I love both EV analogies, the idea that people drive these EVs because they're a better product. So it was kind of fun to think about hot water in the context of the clean energy transition.
Yeah, I did really enjoy my talk with Luke. Just, also shows that not only the envelope needs to be taken care of, but all the systems that go into the buildings too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for folks who are interested in learning more about Reservoir did a really great component spotlight event, Passive House Accelerator, and we will include a link to the recording of that so you can dive into some of the geeky details of all of that. Well, thank you. I mean, we have a second edition coming up very soon, so there's more coming. Anything else you wanted to add, Ilka, before we wrap up this half of the experience?
Well, I think I've been on the content committee, kind of seeing, the makings of the conference for the last 2 years, and just thanking everyone to do, to put so much work into this. And I think this year's co-chairs, Clay and Greg, did a really, really good job of just continuing what Jacob started last year with even, the saxophone playing in between and doing a little bit of playing games and poetry and just things that you probably wouldn't necessarily find in these conferences. And it definitely, the mood just changes. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to highlight just what a delight it is to have Jacob involved in these sessions as well. And to celebrate what Jacob and others have accomplished with ResNet and embodied carbon, I think it's what standard 1550, just a really important progress on bringing materials and upfront carbon into the conversation around building decarbonization. And Jacob played a really central role in that and continues to do so.
And just bringing his perspective to the podcast too. I'm just very thankful that he was so generous with his time, because he was very, very busy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
He was great.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Ilka. And thanks everybody for joining us for this episode. And please tune in next time for part 2. We, at the Passive House Accelerator, we have a great Passive House Accelerator live event this Wednesday. It's a 101 session called Mechanical Systems Design in Smoke and Extreme Conditions. It's with John Semmelhack of Comfort Squad. John is a longtime expert in indoor air quality, mechanical systems, and passive house. So it's really a pleasure to have him join us this Wednesday. This is also part of the lead up to our next Reimagine Buildings Conference, which will be happening in mid-May, which will be focusing on designing for passive survivability. So stay tuned for more details about that Reimagine Buildings Conference. And with that, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.